At Christmas dinner, my brother said, "Let's go around and say what we're grateful for." When it was my turn, he interrupted. "Skip him. He's got nothing." I smiled, pulled out an envelope, and placed it in front of Dad. "You're right. I have nothing. Except this." It was the deed to the house I'd bought from the bank 3 months ago when they defaulted. Dad opened it and whispered. My brother liked to joke that I was the least successful one in the family. At Christmas dinner last year, he said it out loud. At Christmas dinner, my brother said, "Let's go around and say what we're grateful for." When it was my turn, he interrupted. "Skip him. He's got nothing." So I smiled, pulled out an envelope, and put it in front of my dad. "You're right," I said. "I have nothing except this." It was the deed to the house they'd been living in for 27 years. The house I'd bought from the bank 3 months earlier when they defaulted. Dad opened it, read the first line, and whispered, "Thomas, what did you do?" "Sup, Reddit. Grab your snacks, because this takes a minute to explain. My name's Thomas, I'm 34, and I'm a biomedical engineer in Columbus, Ohio. I design and test medical devices. Nothing glamorous, a lot of spreadsheets and lab time, but it pays the bills. I make good money for Midwestern standards, somewhere around $145,000 a year plus bonuses, and I'm the kind of person who knows where every dollar goes. In my family, that made me the serious one. My younger brother, Jake, is 30. Growing up, he was the fun one, the charming one, the natural salesman, according to my parents. I was the straight-A kid, the one doing physics homework on Friday nights while Jake was figuring out how to sneak out of the house without making the dog bark. Our parents, Mark and Linda, are textbook middle-class Ohio parents. Dad works in auto parts distribution. Mom did daycare out of our house for years. They're not evil, but they have a very specific lens. If you're loud, confident, and talk about big opportunities, they think you're destined for greatness. If you're quiet and reliable, they kind of assume you'll be fine on your own. You can probably guess who ended up in which category. When I got into Ohio State for biomedical engineering, my parents congratulated me, hugged me, and said, "We're so proud. We wish we could help more, but you're smart, you'll figure it out." Translation: I took on scholarships, grants, and about $62,000 in student loans. I worked in the campus lab, did tutoring, and lived in a shared apartment with 3 other guys and a temperamental smoke alarm. When Jake decided college wasn't for him and wanted to enroll in a for-profit entrepreneurship academy in Florida, my parents refinanced the house to pay the $35,000 tuition and gave him their car. "It's an investment," Dad told me. "Your brother's a natural leader. He just needs a launch pad." I remember looking at the paperwork on the kitchen table. New mortgage amount, $198,000. Cash out for home improvements that I never saw. I was 20, home for winter break, eating leftover lasagna and wondering how many extra shifts at the lab I had to pick up to cover my own tuition. I didn't say anything. That was my role back then, the understanding one. Over the next decade, the pattern set in stone. Jake bounced from idea to idea. Amazon FBA store, real estate wholesaling, social media marketing agency, drop shipping, crypto, coaching other people on how to do all of the above. Each project came with a new logo, a new Instagram page, and a new speech from my parents about how this could be the one. When something went wrong, and it always did, there was a reason. The market shifted. His partner let him down. People just don't understand his vision. Meanwhile, I graduated, got my master's, and started at a medical device company. My life was boring in comparison. I had KPIs instead of followers, peer-reviewed studies instead of funnels, and I went to Costco on weekends. My parents loved to tell extended family how proud they were of both our boys, Jake the entrepreneur and Thomas the engineer, but the energy was different. If Jake needed money, there was a family meeting. If I needed anything, there was a lecture about independence. The first time I really felt it sting, I was 26 and trying to buy my first condo. I had a steady job, decent credit, and about $40,000 saved for a down payment. The lender suggested that if I had a co-signer, I could get a better rate. "Absolutely not," Dad said. "We learned our lesson with the Helic. We can't put the house at risk again." 2 months later, Jake came home with a used BMW 5 Series and proudly announced he'd gotten a fantastic deal on a lease because Dad had co-signed. "It's just for business meetings," Jake said, clapping my shoulder. "Clients expect a certain image." I ended up buying a smaller condo with a higher interest rate and a 12-year-old Honda Civic I paid for in cash. I told myself it was fine. I was building quietly. That's what adults do. Fast forward a few years, and a lot of little cuts later, I got promoted to senior engineer. Jake's agency pivoted 3 more times. My condo appreciated a bit. I maxed out my 401k, and I built up a 6-month emergency fund. Jake built up more stories about how close he was to a breakthrough. Then the pandemic hit. My job got busier. His clients disappeared. One night in late 2021, my parents called me on FaceTime. They were in the living room, both looking serious. Tommy, Mom said, using the childhood nickname I hate. We need to talk about the house. The short version, they'd missed several mortgage payments. The forbearance they'd gotten during the early pandemic had ended, and the adjusted payment plus some of the stuff they'd done years ago, refinancing to pay for Jake's school, taking a helic for one of his businesses, had all caught up to them. They were about $28,000 behind. I asked for numbers. Exact numbers. I had them email me the statements. Original mortgage, paid down to about $112,000 before the refi. Refi plus helic plus fees, back up near $200,000. Current principal, $183,000. Missed payments, late fees, etc., $27,684.19. You guys didn't think to talk to me before any of this? I asked. Dad sighed. We didn't want to burden you. You're working so hard. But they did think to talk to me now, when the bank had already sent a notice of default. I did what I always do. I built a spreadsheet. I ran scenarios. If I wired them the $28,000, they'd keep the house, for now. But their income hadn't gone up. The payment was still too high for their budget, especially with inflation and medical stuff creeping in. What's the plan after I clear this? I asked. Dad, we're hoping rates go down. Maybe we refinance again. Mom, Jake's got a big project about to land. That'll help. Of course he did. I suggested they sell. The house was worth around $260,000 in that market. They'd pay off the mortgage, have some cash, and could downsize to a smaller place or even rent something without the stress. My parents looked at me like I'd suggested putting the dog down for fun. This is our home, Mom said, eyes already shiny. We raised you boys here. We're not selling, Dad said. We just need a bridge. By bridge, they meant me. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I asked for time. That night, I sat in my condo with the mortgage statements spread out on my coffee table, my laptop open to the county property records. I could see every lien, every refinance, every time my parents had tried to paper over Jake's failures with home equity. It wasn't one big betrayal. It was 1,000 small ones. They had leveraged the house over and over again to support him, and now they wanted me to be the safety net under all of it, quietly, in the background, like always. For the first time, something in my brain shifted from, how do I fix this, to do I want to be part of this pattern anymore? I called my parents back the next day and told them the truth. I love you, I said, but I'm not writing a $28,000 check into a system that's broken. You need a sustainable plan, not a Band-Aid. Dad was quiet. Mom cried. Jake, who was apparently in the room, grabbed the phone. Bro, come on, he said. It's just numbers to you. You make six figures doing whatever you do with those robots. I design devices that keep people alive, I said. And it's not just numbers. It's my time, my work, and my future. You've had a lot of just this once. He laughed like I was being dramatic. You've always been so tight. This is family. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, I'm not your investor, and hung up. 3 months later, the house went into foreclosure. They didn't tell me. I found out because one of my coworkers mentioned that the bank he uses was holding a series of foreclosure auctions in our county and joked that it was a fun way to get a deal. On a whim, and maybe because I already had nightmares about them getting scammed by some stranger, I looked up the list. There it was. My childhood address. Minimum bid, $190,000. I sat with that information for a full week. Morally, emotionally, financially, it was a mess. If a stranger bought it and decided to raise the rent or kick my parents out, they'd be in real trouble. They had no savings. Renting a similar house in that area would cost more than their old mortgage payment, and their credit was trashed. If I stepped in directly, called the bank, tried to negotiate a buyout, I'd be putting myself and my boundaries right back in the line of fire. My parents had not once come to me and said, we messed up. We chose Jake's dreams over stability. We're sorry. They were still in denial. What I ended up doing was very me. I talked to a lawyer friend and a financial advisor. I asked a lot of boring questions. I learned that once the house went to auction, my parents were out of the chain. The bank would sell to the highest qualified bidder. The previous owners might be given a short window to move, but if the new owner wanted to be generous, they could offer a rental agreement. Legally, my lawyer friend said, if you buy it at auction, you're just another buyer. Morally, that's between you and your folks. I ran the numbers again. If I bought it at, say, $210,000 with 20% down, I'd have a second property with a manageable mortgage. The rent in that area could cover the payment if I ever decided to treat it as a pure rental. If my parents lived there, I could charge them below market rent and still not be bleeding money. It wasn't about owning them. It was about owning the situation so it didn't own me. So I went to the auction. If you've never been to one, it's not glamorous. It was a conference room in a bland office building with coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. People in polo shirts and dad jeans sat with clipboards, whispering numbers. Everything smelled like carpet cleaner and impatience. My parents weren't there. When our house came up, there were exactly 2 bidders, a local property management company, and me. Bidding started at $190,000. They went to $195,000. I went to $200,000. They countered at $205,000. I said $210,000. They hesitated, made a phone call, then dropped out. I signed a stack of papers, wired my down payment, and walked out as the owner of the house I'd grown up in. On the drive home, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like I had just bought an extremely complicated asset that also happened to contain my parents' and my brother's drama. I didn't tell them right away. The bank served them with the official notice that the property had been sold and that the new owner would be in touch. My parents called me, panicked, because now a faceless investor was going to kick them to the curb. I listened, heart pounding, and said, "Okay, when you hear from the new owner, let me know what they say." 2 weeks later, closing finalized. I had the deed in my hand, my name on the county records, a fresh mortgage to pay, and a decision. I could call them and say, "Surprise, it's me. Here's a lease at a fair rate, and here are the boundaries." That would have been the straightforward approach. But then the annual Christmas dinner loomed. Every year, my parents insist on hosting. Same house, same decorations, same folding chairs pulled from the garage when we inevitably invite too many people. This year, the guest list included me, my girlfriend Hannah, my parents, my grandmother, a couple of cousins, and of course Jake, who had big plans for a new coaching program he was developing. Hannah knew most of the backstory. We'd spent nights going over old texts, bank statements, and my weird guilt about everything. She's a nurse, very practical, and very done with people who weaponize guilt. "If you're going to tell them," she said the week before Christmas, "I think you should do it in a way that's clear and not cruel. Facts, options, boundaries. That's it." I agreed. Then Christmas dinner happened. We were all sitting around the table, plates stacked with ham and green beans and the world's driest mashed potatoes. My dad refuses to use enough butter. Jake was in high gear, telling the table about his client pipeline and revenue projections like he was on a podcast. At some point, fueled by wine and attention, he clinked his fork against his glass. "All right, everybody," he said, grinning. "Let's go around and say what we're grateful for this year." Mom loved that kind of thing. "Oh, that's nice," she said. "I'll start. I'm grateful for family, for our health, and for this home." She actually patted the wall behind her. Dad said he was grateful for Mom, for second chances, and for God providing. Grandma was grateful for still being around at 82, which made everyone laugh. Then it was Jake's turn. "I'm grateful for opportunities," he said. "For taking risks. For not being stuck in some boring lab job." He winked at me when he said that. I smiled tightly. Then Hannah went. She said she was grateful for her patience, for me, and for getting adopted by my crazy family. People odd. Then all eyes turned to me. I opened my mouth. Jake cut in, loud enough to make the silverware rattle. "Skip him, he's got nothing. He just works and saves. That's not a life, that's a spreadsheet." There was a split second where the whole room froze. Mom laughed a little too loudly, like it was a harmless joke. Dad smirked. Someone coughed. And something in me just clicked. For 30+ years, I'd swallowed comments like that. "You're so serious. You don't know how to have fun. You're lucky you're smart. The rest of us have to hustle." I looked at Jake, still grinning like he'd said something clever, and realized I didn't owe this room my silence anymore. I reached down beside my chair, where I'd put my messenger bag when we came in. I brought the envelope just in case I lost my nerve or in case the right opening appeared. Apparently, this was it. I pulled the envelope out, placed it gently in front of my dad's plate, and said, "You're right, Jake. I don't have much. Just this." Everyone stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. Dad frowned. "What's this?" "Open it," I said. He slid his thumb under the flap and pulled out the stapled pages. You could see the county seal through the paper. His eyes moved across the top line, then froze on my name. "Thomas Nathaniel Miller," he read softly. "That's my full legal name. It was listed as grantee." He swallowed. His voice got smaller. "This is the deed." Mom leaned over his shoulder. "Deed to what?" "To the house," he said. There was a long silence. The kind that makes you aware of the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock in the hallway. Jake laughed first. "Okay, what? Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," I said. 3 months ago, when the bank auctioned the property, I bought it. It's been in my name since September." Mom's face went through about 5 emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, embarrassment, then fear. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. Because I wanted to have a clear conversation when things were calm, I said. But since we're doing gratitude, I thought this was the right time to be honest about what I actually have. I kept my tone even. No gloating. Just facts. You lost the house because of choices you made over many years, I continued. The refinancing, the helix, the missed payments. I didn't cause that. What I did was make sure that whoever bought it wouldn't treat you like a line item. You bought our home out from under us, Jake snapped. That's messed up, man. No, I said, turning to him. The bank took the home when they foreclosed. I bought a property at auction. There's a difference. You and Mom and Dad had months of notices. You knew it was coming. Dad opened his mouth, closed it, then looked back at the deed. So what happens now? Grandma asked quietly. Now, I said, we talk like adults. After Christmas, I'd like to sit down with you, Mom and Dad, and go over a lease. I'm willing to rent the house to you below market. I'm not throwing you out, but I'm also not going to be an invisible ATM. The rent has to be paid on time. No secret loans for business ideas. No more betting the roof over your head on one more opportunity. You can't charge your own parents' rent, Mom said, scandalized. I can, I said gently. And I will. Because the alternative is watching you keep making the same decisions until there's nothing left, and then being blamed for not stepping in sooner. Jake scoffed. So you get to be the big man now, huh? Mr. Landlord. This is your little power trip. I looked at him and, for once, didn't try to argue him into understanding. You've had a lot of support, I said. From Mom, from Dad, from this house. I'm not taking away your history. I'm just saying I'm done paying for the fallout of your choices. He leaned back, shaking his head. You're punishing them because you're jealous. You always were. That's not what this is, Hannah said suddenly, her voice calm but firm. This is Thomas putting a boundary where there's been none. You don't have to like it, but you don't get to rewrite what happened. The room went quiet again. Grandma, bless her, reached over and patted my hand. He's giving you a roof, she told my parents. You could have ended up with a stranger. Better to pay your own son fair than be at the mercy of someone who doesn't care. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We never meant to hurt you, she said to me. We always thought you were okay. Jake needed more help. I know you didn't mean to, I said. But intentions don't pay mortgages. And I'm tired of pretending there's no cost to any of this. Dad folded the deed back into the envelope, hands shaking a little. Can we at least talk about this privately? He asked. Of course, I said. This isn't a punishment. It's a reset. I'll email you a draft lease. We'll go over numbers. No surprises. Jake pushed his chair back, so hard it scraped the floor. I'm not signing anything, he said. I'm not living under my brother's thumb. You're a grown man, I said. You can find your own place. Mom and Dad are the ones on the lease. He stormed out, muttering something under his breath. The front door slammed a moment later. Dinner didn't really recover after that. People picked at their pie and avoided eye contact. But a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was sitting in my own life instead of the role everyone had assigned me. In the days after Christmas, the fallout came in waves. Jake sent me a series of long texts accusing me of stealing generational wealth, undermining his legacy, and destroying the family. I didn't engage. I responded once, with a short message. I bought a house from a bank. I'm offering Mom and Dad a stable place to live with clear terms. I'm not discussing this further by text. Then I muted the thread. My parents came over to my condo one Saturday, sat at my kitchen table, and we went through the lease line by line like a business meeting. I printed budgets, showed them what market rent in their neighborhood looked like, and then showed them the discounted number I was offering. It was still a stretch for them, but between Dad's job and Mom taking on some part-time babysitting again, it was doable. I'm not making a profit off you, I said. I'm covering the mortgage, taxes, and a bit for repairs. That's it. In return, you pay on time and you don't take on new debt against the property. Ever. If you can't make a month, you tell me before it's due, and we come up with a plan together. No surprises. Dad stared at the paper for a long time. I should have protected this house better, he said finally. I'm the one who signed those loans. I know, I said. This isn't about blame. It's about making sure you have a roof without waiting for another shoe to drop. Mom asked, very quietly, do you hate us? I shook my head. No, I just can't keep playing the invisible support role while being treated like I have nothing. This is me stepping into the role I actually have. Someone who understands numbers and consequences. They signed. As for Jake, he refused to move back in under any circumstances where there was paperwork involved. He couch surfed with friends for a while, then moved into a small apartment across town. The BMW got repossessed. His big coaching launch didn't land. Eventually, he picked up a job at a local dealership, which, honestly, might be the most stable thing he's done in years. We're low contact now. Holidays are smaller. There's more honesty, less performance. From the outside, it might look like it might look like a dramatic moment, my brother that night at Christmas. That's not how it feels on the inside. I didn't buy the house to punish anyone. I bought it to keep a bad situation from getting worse, and then I used it as a line in the sand. I stopped writing blank checks. I stopped pretending my parents' choices had no consequences. I stopped letting my brother define my worth in front of people I care about. Today, my life is quieter. I still go to work, still deal with FDA approvals and test protocols and devices that beep at the wrong time. Hannah and I are talking about getting a place together in a year or two. My parents pay their rent on time. When something breaks in the house, we talk about it like landlord and tenants, estimates, timelines, responsibilities. It's not the family fantasy I grew up with, but it's honest. If there's a lesson in all this, it's not that you should secretly buy your parents' house and drop the deed at Christmas dinner. That's a very specific solution to a very specific mess. The real lesson, at least for me, is that stability doesn't come from being the quiet, endlessly accommodating one. It comes from knowing what you're actually responsible for and what you're not, and being willing to say no, even when the room expects you to smile and stay grateful. I didn't destroy anyone's life. I just stopped subsidizing their bad decisions, and then I let the math do what math always does. Thomas's story taught me something brutal. You can fund your own education while your parents refinance the house for your brother's dreams, then get mocked for having nothing in the house you secretly own. Jake didn't just fail at business. He failed systematically for a decade while parents kept betting the house. Literally, they refinanced for his $35,000 entrepreneurship academy, took a helic for his ventures, co-signed his BMW lease while refusing to co-sign Thomas's first condo. The pattern was clear. Jake's dreams mattered. Thomas's stability was assumed. When the house went into foreclosure with $28,000 in missed payments, Thomas's parents finally called, not to apologize, but to ask for a bridge. When Thomas said no to writing a blank check into a broken system, they acted betrayed. 3 months later, he bought the house at auction for $210,000. He didn't tell them. He waited. The moment that captures everything. Christmas dinner. Jake raises his glass for gratitude speeches, then interrupts Thomas with "Skip him. He's got nothing. He just works and saves. That's not a life. That's a spreadsheet." Thomas pulled out an envelope, slid it across the table. Inside, the deed. His name as owner. Jake's face when he realized Thomas didn't have nothing. He had their childhood home. When your family treats your quiet competence as having nothing, while celebrating loud failure as potential, buying the house they lost isn't revenge, it's documentation. Thomas didn't steal anything. The bank foreclosed. He bought at auction to keep strangers from evicting his parents. Then he offered below-market rent with one condition: no more using the house as collateral for Jake's next scheme. The cruelty wasn't the purchase. It was 30 years of "you're so serious," while they refinanced Thomas's childhood home to fund Jake's Amazon FBA store, crypto plays, and coaching programs. It was refusing to co-sign Thomas's condo because we learned our lesson with the helic, then co-signing Jake's BMW 2 months later because clients expect a certain image. When your parents leverage their house repeatedly for one child's failures while the other pays their own way, then mock that child for having nothing, is revealing you own that house cruelty, or just ending a decades-long lie. And how many times do you watch someone bet your childhood home on one more opportunity before you realize helping means stopping the bleeding? Share your stories. Because being the responsible one shouldn't mean funding everyone else's fantasy until the bank forecloses.